Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Muhammad Haniff bin Ghazali and I would like to present my master project 2. My project is about mental fatigue analysis based on electroencephalography spectrum, which is EEG, mental fatigue scale and reaction time. My supervisor is TS Dr. Muhammad HAZLI bin MAZLAN. This is the outline that we go through along in this slide of presentation, which is the introduction, the literature review, methodology, result and discussion, conclusion, limitations and suggestions for future works. Okay, for introduction, fatigue is a medical condition that reduces mental or physical capability caused by a lack of sleep, a disruption in the circadian period, or a serious effort. With abrupt changes in typical face-to-face learning styles, students were subject to higher academic stress, which may result in adverse health consequences such as fatigue. Fatigue is typically divided by two, which is physical fatigue and mental fatigue. For physical fatigue, it is characterized as a reduction in capacity to perform physical work because of activities that require physical effort. And then for the mental fatigue, occurs as a result of extended periods of cognitive activity and results in a decrease in cognitive and behavioral output. Okay, next, I would like to explain more about the different stages of problem that can occur to our body. The first one is tiredness, state of mind and or body feeling the need for rest. Next one is stress, non-specific reaction of the mind and or body to any demand. Next one, fatigue, extreme form of tiredness often described as exhaustion. And the lastly is burnout, also known as compassion fatigue, is a chronic form of tiredness that can interfere with the ability to function. So in this project, I would like to analyze more about fatigue. Okay, now is problem statement. Students spend a lot of their times in front of their computer or tablet or laptop as a medium to use in their online learning. And decreased outdoor social activities may have resulted in poorer academic quality and higher lateness. Next, we go to the objectives. First is to analyze the subject's mental state by analyzing waveform using electroencephalography, which is EEG. Second one is to evaluate the mental state of subjects from the mental fatigue scale. And the last is to analyze how mental fatigue can impact someone's reaction time. Next, we move to scopes. The first scope is the student that age from 19 to 30 years old in University Tun Hussein On Malaysia, UTHM. The next one is 30 subjects to analyze the subject's EEG spectrum. Then, mental fatigue scale that will contribute to analyze the mental fatigue. Then, the reaction time test based on the arithmetic task. And the last one is all the analysis will go to the ANOVA analysis or paired t-test analysis in IBM SPSS software. For the next is literature review. Fatigue. Fatigue is a subjective physiological condition that people undergo as a result of the physical or mental exertion. Traditionally, fatigue tracking has focused on subjective data gathered through questionnaires. Neurophysiological state characterized by subjective feelings of tiredness and lack of capacity induced by prolonged periods of stressful cognitive activity. Then, fatigue has an impact on psychomotor performance not only because of its physiological effects, but also because it influences decision-making ability. Mental fatigue can be attributed to alcohol, task stress, and a lack of rest or sleep. Next is about electroencephalography, which is EEG and the brainwaves. Neurons in the nervous system are interconnected with one another by creating neural nets, which are linked by a passage called a synapse, which enable activities. Electroencephalogram is a test that measures electrical activity in the brain. Electrical impulse enable brain cells to interact with one another. The frontal, temporal, occipital, and parietal lobes and the central sulcus are all parts of the cerebral cortex. Here we can see all the parts in our cerebral cortex, which is in our brain. The letter denotes the area of the brain in which the electrode is placed, such as frontal, central, temporal, parietal, and occipital. While the numbering denotes the cerebral hemisphere, with even digits in the right hemisphere and odd digits in the left. So in this project, we will focus on the frontal and the central area of the brain. Next, we move to the mental fatigue scale. Fatigue is typically measured as a subjective condition using self-report questionnaires, making an objective evaluation as a technique of evaluating it challenging to connect. The mental fatigue scale (MFS) is a multivariate questionnaire with 14 questions. The cut-off number for the 42-point scale is 10.5, which indicates a worried pathological mental fatigue. So this is the graph that result from the previous research that they find how to use the mental fatigue scale. So if the number is over than 10.5 points, so they are categorized as they are in the mental fatigue state. Next, we move to the reaction time. Evaluating fatigue enables for the early detection of bad situation caused by a variety of factors. Reaction time is the initial step in developing a fatigue framework. Mental fatigue would lead to a worsening in response inhibition, resulting in increase in reaction time. This is the graph that resulted from previous research. We can see at the left hand side of the bar chart the reaction time. After simulated driving task, the reaction time is much more higher before the simulated driving task. Next is methodology. This research is divided by two parts, which is the part 1 is from the online dataset, which is the EEG spectrum. And for part 2 is real-time data collection, which is for the MFS or mental fatigue scale and the reaction time. Okay, we move to the methodology, which is for the part 1, that is EEG. The data of the EEG waveform contains 30 subjects of various ages and sex. The EEG data consists of 4 minutes for each subject that have been recorded. The first 3 minutes will be for the subjects did the mental arithmetic task, and the final 1 minute were the subjects did the mental arithmetic task. This project will use the first minute before the study and the last minute when the subjects do the job to gather the data. Paired t-test analysis used to find if the compared data had any correlation between before and during the task. This is the block diagram for the EEG spectrum analysis. The first is EEG acquisition, that is from internet or online, and then we convert the EDF file into Excel. Then we select the interval time, which is the first 1 minute and the final 1 minute. And then we select the electrode channel, that is from the frontal area and the central area. After we select the electrode channel, we use the value that saved in the Excel format into the paired t-test. And then we calculate the power. And lastly, the power will determine whether the subject is normal or in fatigue state. Okay, next we move to another part, which is part 2, that have the MFS and the reaction time. This is the real-time data collected from the mental fatigue scale and reaction time conducted online for every participant. This is the flowchart that required in this part, which is from the start. The participants need to answer the MFS or mental fatigue scale in Google form, and then they will submit the score. After they finish answer their mental fatigue scale, they have to execute their arithmetic mental task and then submit the reaction time test through email. Then we will select the early 200 and final 200 reaction time, and lastly analyze the data in SPSS software. Next, I will explain more detail about MFS and the reaction time. MFS, mental fatigue scale, that has 14 questions related to mental fatigue. In each question, there were 7 choices of answer. This is the mental fatigue scale questions about, which is the general exhaustion, amount of initiative, mental fatigue, mental recoveries, focus issues, problems with memory, quickness of thought, reactivity to stress, greater inclination to become agitated, anger, sensitivity to light and noise, diminish or increase sleep in individuals. From the 7 choices of answer, this is the score that will be evaluated from each answer, which is 0 until the maximum is 3. Next is reaction time. Reaction time is about the mental arithmetic task for 2 hours long. This is because we have to make sure that the subject is in mental fatigue state, and this task is self-developed. Next, the test is done to get their initial response when they start the test and time response after a long time doing the test without rest. Subject will be displayed the instruction on their screen, and then they will press any key to start the test. The equation of a single digit unit with plus or minus operation will be displayed. The equation was random, so the participants could not predict the next question. Participants need to decide whether the answer shown on the screen was less than, equal, or more than from the answer revealed. Screen will show if the participants' answer were correct or wrong. Reaction time for each equation also will be shown on the screen. All of the information will be stored as data in Microsoft Excel and used in SPSS software to analyze the data. Next, we move to the result, which is from the EEG spectral wave. Paired t-test analyses are used to find the relationship between condition 1, which is before doing the arithmetic test, and condition 2, which is during the arithmetic test. The highest mean value was 0.19 for subject 22 and subject 01, while the lowest mean value was subject 12 with negative 0.09. The highest standard deviation value was 0.28 at subject 22, and the lowest standard deviation was 0.01 at subject 9. The lowest p-value was 0.000 for subject 01 and subject 23. On the other hand, the highest p-value was 0.0436 for subject 22. From this table, we can see that the p-value correlate with each other from condition 1 and condition 2, which is the p-value is less than 0.05. The highest and lowest spectrum value for condition 2 was 1.244 volt and 0.0015 volt for subject 22 and subject 9. The highest spectrum value in condition 1 was 0.0216 volt for subject 10, while the lowest spectrum is 0.0005 volt for subject 29. The highlighted subjects, which are subject 7, subject 9, subject 11, and subject 23, were not shown any fatigue symptom even during doing the arithmetic task. These findings are similar to the previous investigations discovered in their study that increasing focus attention or the time pressure of the suggested task cause a rise in the EEG power spectra. Okay, this is the result for the each subject that shown in the graph bar charts. The green one is for condition 1 and the red one is for condition 2. We can see here, subject 22 has the highest power spectrum in condition 2 and the lowest condition 2 power spectrum is subject 11. So here next is we can see the subject 22 power spectrum for each of the channel that used in this analysis. We can see that in condition 2, it has higher value for condition 2 compared to the condition 1. And the next one is subject 11. We can see that condition 1 for subject 11 is much more higher than condition 2. Okay, next we move into the result of mental fatigue scale. 28 respondents that have been responded to the Google form. The age of each respondent was in the range of 19 to 27 years old. The ANOVA one-way analysis shows that this result were not statistically significant between the age of the subjects and the score of the mental fatigue scale. Next, the total number of male respondents was 15, that representing 53.57% of the total respondents. The number of female is 13, that represent 46.43% of the total respondents. There was no correlation between male and female subjects concerning the MFS score. MFS score higher than 10.5 were categorized as in mental fatigue state. Participants that did not suffer mental fatigue were highly from the male that constitute 8 participants, while female participants that only 5 participants identified. Female participants were the submajority in the mental fatigue state that involved 8 participants, whereas only 7 participants has been classified in fatigue state. This finding is in agreement with previous researchers find that females have more mental health difficulties than guys. Next, we move into reaction time test. In the reaction time test, only 46.43%, which is 13 respondents from total 28 respondents, were willing to take the test. The final 200 arithmetic questions have a longer amount of time compared to the earlier questions. The t-test was 4.32 with standard deviation 3.56 with p-value less than 0.05, which is more specific 0.001. This shows that the early reaction time has a significant difference from the final reaction times. From this table, the highlighted yellow is the subject that did not perform the reaction time test. The highlighted red color is the highest amount of the reaction time test in the final is 14.4923 seconds and the lowest is 1.1677 seconds. This result of reaction time shows that each of the subject was in mental fatigue as they doing the arithmetic test. All of the subject shows that the final reaction time was longer compared to the early reaction. The present finding seems to be consistent with other research which found that the decrease of mood and attention states during the longer reaction time task implies that task performance causes mental fatigue in individuals. Okay, next we move into conclusion. One is the overall spectral power increase across all channel locations due to the EEG signal and non-stop intensive performance with competition and choice reaction activities, which is in the frontal and the central areas. 2. The power spectrum of EEG signal in condition 2 much higher than condition 1 indicates that the subjects were in mental fatigue state. Next one is female participants were highly in mental fatigue state compared to male participants. And the last one is significant difference between the reaction time of the early 200 reaction time test and the final 200 reaction time test show that when someone induce mental fatigue, their reaction will take longer than before. Next is the limitation of this project. Unable to analyze the correlation between sex and mental fatigue score, also the correlation between age and the score of the mental fatigue scale. 2. No EEG equipment could be used to acquire the real-time EEG signal of the students. 3. Numbers of the subjects doing the MFS and reaction time test were not tallied. 4. The result of the arithmetic test does not include whether their answer was correct or false, so that no error rate analysis can be conducted in this project. And the last for this presentation is the suggestion. The power spectrum on other locations of EEG channels would be great help in precisely analyzing the mental fatigue state of someone. The number of subjects investigated in future study will be more accurate if there is the higher number of subjects. Third is the investigation the level of mental fatigue state using both EEG signal and reaction time test simultaneously. And the final is determine the error rate of the subjects when induced with mental fatigue so that the result can be more accurate. So that's it from me for my presentation. Thank you.